To talk more about the end of the season, it's Luis Ortiz, it's Zach Tawatari, and it's former Texan Seth Payne from Sports Radio 610. Seth, how are you handling this winter weather?
I'm handling it fine. I'm jealous that we weren't there being miserable in Denver, but other than that, I'm fine.
Yes.
Very much a FOMO action going on this weekend in the Payne household.
Good.
My wife feels like that all the time, but especially football, the football feeling right now.
Nick Caserio mentioned closing the book, so let's play along with that. What should be the last sentence of the final chapter of that book, Seth?
All right, mine is simple. 3 words. We want more. And I think the players feel that way too. There's a team that's capable of more than what we saw in New England to finish the season, and it's okay to be greedy, okay? This is sports. This isn't life. You need to be greedy all the time. You want more, win a Super Bowl, then you want to be greedy for another Super Bowl. I would just like to win a divisional championship game.
All right, I'm going to say defense wins championships and offense wins games. Because I think you saw it, and it was evident it was going to happen at one point. It's not sustainable to win games by just playing great defense. The Texans were going to have to score points at some point, and then you saw it. You got to play well, take care of the football, and get into the end zone. If not, you're going to end up losing.
All right, Zach, your last sentence.
Mine is very simple. 3 words, just like Seth, except mine is to be continued. And that's because as much as Nick Caserio wants to say he's closed the book on 2025, the reality is a lot of those problems in this season could follow the Texans into next season if they're not addressed.
It's interesting you say that because my last sentence was going to be very similar to that theme. My last sentence was going to be this: there are now more questions than the year before. Because I just think that there's more questions now, Seth. I mean, what do we know about CJ?
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I think they made progress on the offensive line. It felt like CJ had made progress in terms of playing conservatively when he needs to play conservatively when you've got such a great defense on the other side of the ball. And yet all of that flew out the window, not just in the final playoff game, but really both playoff games. He was haphazard. He was careless with the football. He was taking chances that he shouldn't have been taken. And it was a huge surprise because I genuinely thought that even though his numbers weren't great this year, he had actually made a lot of advancement into maturing into a true veteran quarterback. So this is one of those classic situations where, A, you want to see a better regular season performance next year, but we really won't know about this playoff situation until hopefully they make the playoffs.
Also, let's go back to the day after the Texans game and analyzing how CJ played.
Dropping his eyes in the pocket, staring at the rush, but that pick six that's not even a rookie mistake. What on earth are you doing on that pick six? What on God's green earth are you doing just throwing the ball up in the air with a guy on your person? That defender was touching fabric as he's deciding to just hurl it up in the air. I mean, that was unforgivable. That is unexplainable. Well, that's irredeemable.
So there is Seth with Sean Pendergast on Payne and Pendergast mornings on Sports Radio 610. And now Seth, some 150 hours later, do you feel differently about what happened in New England, or do you have the same level of disgust?
Look, you do things all the time in sports that you can't explain afterwards. And it would be redeemable. It would be forgivable. It would be all of those other things if he hadn't been so careless with the football throughout the entire playoffs, from the fumbles to the forced passes to that throw right there. That's the part that's just hard to wrap your head around. What I tried to remind myself this week was, who had a really, really bad stretch. His first 6 trips to the playoffs was Peyton Manning. In his first 8 seasons, his first 6 trips to the playoffs were just abysmally bad. He finally had a pretty good stretch in 2003 where he had a couple of good games, and then in the AFC Championship threw 1 touchdown and 4 interceptions versus the Patriots in New England. And Peyton eventually got it together. So I'm not sitting here saying C.J. Stroud is the next Peyton Manning or anything, but I'm trying to remind myself that, hey, these things do happen. Quarterbacks have bad playoff stretches or bad playoff games, and it is redeemable if you come back and redeem yourself in 2026.
I certainly am sad for the city of Houston and its fans. I always felt that a lot of the warts that we saw during the regular season were at some point all together going to come to a head. And I'm not exactly certain that's what happened in this game, but I kind of feel the same way as I did then as I do now.
I think that is what happened in this past game, Jason. You heard Nick Caserio say it in the press conference the other day. He said this game looked a lot like our first 3 games of the season. And I would argue that even in their wins, they won pretty ugly for the most part. I don't even have to argue that. That's just what it is, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think that all those things ultimately showed up at the end of the day.
Well, they say, true colors always come out to the light, right? And I think, as you mentioned, and what Nick Caserio said, those first 3 games are a representation, or that final game are a representation of the beginning of the season. I still feel the same way regarding the interceptions thrown by CJ, minus the one to Xavier Hutchinson. I think Hutch had a lot to do with that one. If he catches that ball, then obviously it's not an interception. But aside from that, I still feel the same. You can say, yes, CJ, maybe if he had a running back to give the ball to, if Joe Mixon would play during the season at all, make it's a different story. There's different areas of the game or the team that you can point to where you can maybe try to make, I don't want to say excuses, but at least, make an argument in his case. Other than that, as far as the interceptions go, I still feel the same.
Yeah, and I think, It felt like he was pressing. It felt like he was pressing in the Steelers game, and it felt like he was pressing in the Patriots game, trying to force something to happen. So with a better offense around him, with a better run, with Joe Mixon or perhaps a first-round draft pick or second-round draft pick at running back this year, and then with an improved interior offensive line, I think you could very much potentially see the better version of CJ next year. But everything that you guys said, I 100% agree with. It's hard to move past this, and it really you don't get to see football for another half year. So hopefully CJ feels the same way, and he's out there working on improving all of these things.
And now let's go back to that Nick Caserio press conference on Wednesday. It lasted roughly 40 minutes. Luis, you and I were there. Is there a question or perhaps a follow-up question that you would have liked to have asked him, Seth?
We're going to get to talk to him at Radio Row in a week or so, and I do want to ask him about what they do to simulate wet conditions, precipitation, because I know all the discussion nationally about CJ before this game was, how's CJ Stroud going to do in cold weather? I don't worry about cold weather. I worry about how he handles a wet football. Because, look, we saw Drake May had a hard time with it in the Texans game. Anybody would have had a hard time with it in the game in Denver today. But CJ had a worse time of it. And this is something we've seen in Houston. We've seen it against the Jets a couple of years ago. He does not seem to handle wet conditions all that well. And we go back to Caserio's days with the Patriots. We'd hear all types of stories about how Tom Brady would always be practicing a wet football. They would make the conditions as miserable as possible, because this is something I'm starting to be concerned. I don't worry about the cold. I worry about the wet.
Is there a question you wished you could have asked had you been there?
Yeah, this question was asked, but I'd ask him again. Do you think you did enough on offense? Because Caserio,
I don't think he liked that question.
He didn't like it. And the way that he answered it was, we got to this point in the season, we could have competed with anybody. I'm, of course, summarizing his answer. But the reality is the way you got there was extremely taxing on your team, on your offense. You don't know what kind of position you're in if you have better surroundings for CJ. To Seth's point in the last thing that he said, we don't know what the result would have been. So I don't buy that answer. I don't think that that's a way to answer that question. Did you do enough on offense or not, in your estimation?
Yeah, for me, along the lines of what Seth said, I'm intrigued too as far as how do you evaluate what CJ, how he performs under pressure. Kind of what Seth said something earlier. He said, he thought CJ was pressing. I thought maybe he crumbled a little bit under the bright lights. He didn't play his best in those 2 playoff games, and I think maybe that pressure, the magnified stage, the big stage, kind of got to him. And so just how do you evaluate that as far as deciding whether you give him that contract extension or not?
Yeah, no, and Zach, I think to build on what you were saying, the winning a bunch of regular season games is cool and all, but every single one of those guys would tell you the goal is to win a championship. And certainly this year, the stated goal of D'Amico was to take them to new heights. And the offense was good enough to play opposite of that excellent defense, and it got them to where it did. But you saw you need a defense to play a perfect game every game in the playoffs if you want to win with an offense that's constructed like that. So yeah, and I thought I was surprised that Nick answered it the way he did, because the easy answer to that, even after you've won the Super Bowl, is yeah, we could have done more. You can always do more. Like, we could go back. You can always do something to have done it better. And that it's just I was surprised by, I guess, perhaps the defensiveness of that answer.
Mm-hmm. Yep. That's the word I would have used, being defensive. I would love to know, Nick Caserio, are you guys concerned about CJ's body language? How he looks sometimes on the sidelines when things are getting tough? Certainly there are videos out there of Tom Brady and other quarterbacks. Come on, guys, let's do. And CJ, his body language, let's be honest with you, isn't always great on the sidelines during times of trouble and conflict and tough times. How do you think he would answer that question, Seth?
You know what? I think this is something CJ's talked about going back to his days at Ohio State, when Ryan Day and those coaches would talk to him about improving his body language and projecting strength and confidence and all of those things. I typically shy away from talking about body language because I think people read into it too much. But when I'm getting texts from random people who I haven't heard from in 2 years during that game asking me about CJ Stroud's body language, yeah, it's kind of a big deal. And it's one of those things that, man, it's one of those things that sometimes you got to fake it until you make it. Like this is why the military is so excellent at training leaders. They care about posture. They care about these things that project confidence and project strength. And right now, CJ would be getting rolled out of basic officers training.
All right, we are not done talking about the Texans and everything which happened. More is coming up on Sports Extra. Welcome back to Sports Extra. The way the Broncos and Patriots each played on Sunday, could the Texans have beaten either of them in that AFC title game, Seth?
I think there's a chance they could have beat the Broncos, just because they would have turned Jarrett Stidham into jelly. And I mean, even jellier than he was today. The backwards pass that really should have been returned for a touchdown, and eventually, 2 plays later, it was a touchdown. I think the Texans could have stacked on top of that even more so than the Patriots did. Versus the Patriots, it's hard for me to say. And that is one thing that I've also been reminding myself this last week, is that Texans defensive backfield is still very, very young. 2 of your best players are just second-year players, and those guys are going to continue to get better. So I'm excited. It's rare that you get to return all your starters from a defense when it's a really good defense, and those guys are returning them, and the guys in the defensive backfield are going to be 1 more year experienced. So I think that's one of the real positives moving ahead into next season.
Being that I was in New England for that game, I feel like I've seen this movie before with the elements and a low-scoring game, and I think the Texans showed us who they are on Sunday against the Patriots. I don't think they win that game. Based on what we saw offensively this season, I don't think they win that game.
I don't know. I think this year in the AFC, the motto is anybody can beat anybody on any given Sunday. The conference is in a state of turnover, transition right now, whatever you want to call it. We really don't know who's going to shake out at the top when it comes to next year. Those perennial powers no longer there. So I think they could have beaten both of them.
Well, could have, would have, should have, right? But honestly, I think the Texans could have beat the Patriots last week if CJ didn't give them 4 extra opportunities with those interceptions. If it's a completely different game, they might be able to win that game. And then moving forward against the Broncos, I agree with Seth. I think that rushing defense dominates Stidham, and then they're able to pull it out against the Broncos.
It's so hard to not come back to CJ when we're talking about this stuff because you're 100% correct. And look, Nick Caserio in that press conference, without saying it directly, multiple times talked about how you can't win when you turn the ball over that many times. I mean, he all but said we lost that game because our quarterback was so sloppy with the football.
Well, maybe the next time we won't be focusing on that. The next time we talk to you, Seth. Seth, we loved having you nearly every single Sunday on Sports Extra during the football season. Can't wait to have you back as soon as possible. Thanks for being on with us tonight.
I miss you guys. Luckily, I get to leave for the warm weather of Northern California in February next week.